Welcome to the Make Meaning podcast. I'm Lynne, and I've dedicated my life to sharing stories of how people make meaning in their work and find purpose in their lives. On this podcast, we're going to talk about some of the great ideas and activities people do every day to make the world a better place and provide inspiration for others. So much of the meaning we find comes from interacting with great people, developing relationships that are mutually beneficial, and doing work that inspires everyone. I hope you'll be inspired by the people you meet here. We all need to find a way to make meaning in the mundane. Welcome back to the Make Meaning podcast. I'm Lynne, and today I'm speaking with Dr. Joshua Mezrich, Associate Professor of Surgery in the Division of Transplantation at the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine and Public Health. Dr. Mezrich has an undergraduate degree with a major in Russian languages and literature from Princeton University, and he graduated from Cornell University Medical College. He works in Wisconsin, but he's also a writer. He's written many articles for The Atlantic, and his first book, When Death Becomes Life, Notes from a Transplant Surgeon, was released on January 15th, 2019 by HarperCollins. Welcome to the Make Meaning podcast, Josh.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
It's so wonderful to have you. I read about you, read about your book, and I said, I want to speak to this person. This sounds just like you have such an interesting journey. And so I'm excited to talk not only about your book, but about the work that you do as a surgeon as well. I wonder if you can take me through, I know you have quite an interest in writing and storytelling, and I wonder how you chose this medical path while continuing your interest in writing.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I've always thought I had a book in me, or hopefully more than a book. I grew up in a family where we did so much reading. When I was a kid, my parents would make us read 2 books a week, and they would read them as well, and we would discuss them at the dinner table.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I mean, I guess it could have backfired, but ended up we all love reading. And actually, my brother Ben, I have 2 brothers, but my brother Ben is a writer, and his, I think, 21st book is coming out in a couple of weeks.
That's pretty amazing.
So it's really amazing, and I've watched his career and met so many of his friends, and continued my love of reading. For years now, when well, let me back up. So I actually majored in Russian language and literature in college.
Right.
I never thought I would probably have a career in Russian language or literature, but I just loved learning about that culture. I was fascinated by medicine because, my dad went back to medical school when I was younger, and I kind of watched that journey. And of course, I always loved MASH and wanted to be Hawkeye Spears. So
love it.
I think that's part of it.
Yeah.
But I've always wanted to write. And so for years now, when I meet patients that are compelling or have an interesting story, I will say to them, I really am kind of moved by your story. Would you mind if I shared it someday in some fashion? And, I never quite knew when I was going to use them. But then I started writing a little bit for The Atlantic, and was able to tell some of those stories.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think individuals who are in medicine could take several different approaches. There could be the human side. I want to interact with humans and increase their quality of life, save lives, that kind of thing. It could be the science angle as well. I'm so interested in how the anatomy works and the biology, and how do I connect things and reroute things if I need to. And so there's so many different ways. And I think some doctors very much are disconnected from the human side of medicine, whereas others are all about the patient and all about the human experience, which is so different from patient to patient, I imagine.
Right. Yeah? No, it's so true. I mean, I like both sides of it, honestly. And I've always thought the patients teach us so much about life, and it's honestly a privilege to hear their stories and to watch how they deal with illness and disappointment. Sometimes you see them at their best and their worst,
sure.
But I think it's a very special relationship, and I've always kind of really valued that. And I guess I think I get more from the patients than they get from me in a lot of ways.
And of course, they probably say the same thing in reverse.
Maybe so. I will say, like, it's especially during training, you're so kind of busy and there's so many tasks to get done that it is actually easy to lose sight of the patient side of it.
Sure.
Being able to step back and really connect with the patients is actually what makes the job fun and enjoying and enriching.
Yeah.
And I think when you lose that, that's when you can start to feel negative about the career and get burnout and these kinds of things.
Well, I think it's it's interesting. I work in marketing and public relations and communications, and I'm hearing similar things that I know. If I'm working on a task at hand, it doesn't feel very human. It's very get the work done, check things off the to-do list. On the other side, when I'm immersed with a client and I remember why they're so driven to do what they do, and that story is what I'm charged with telling, it becomes a very human connection, a very relationship-based transaction. And so I imagine you probably feel the same.
Yeah, I definitely do. And I have to tell you, writing the book has actually reconnected me with a lot of things because not only was I able to talk to all these patients during the book, but it just kind of reminded me of all the great things, great reasons that I went into this career and all the, what it's all about. So I think, if you have to do the other work, but being able to connect like that is what makes it great. And so what's special about my career.
Let's talk about the book a little bit. So did you know what you were setting out to write, or did you discover it as you interviewed patients?
A little bit of both. I actually, a very important moment was when I read the book Emperor of All Maladies in 2011, which was, Mukherjee's sort of history of parts of cancer, but he used his patients to tell the story.
Sure.
And I really loved how he did that. And I wanted to do something similar, but I didn't want to do it exactly the same. I did want to include some of my own coming of age as a surgeon.
Okay.
Because I like reading about other professions, other people, and learning. And I wanted to write a book where people could read it and really say, so this is what it's really like to do what I do, to be a surgeon, to make decisions, to make errors, to work through problems. So I wanted a piece about that. I wanted the patient stories. And I also wanted to tell the amazing history of transplant.
Yeah.
And I knew that some of the pioneers, were still alive, and that, unfortunately, they're kind of dying off as we speak. And I thought I had the opportunity to kind of get their stories as well.
That must have been a wonderful journey.
It was so great. I mean, that was always going to be a piece of it, and getting to fly around and meet at least some of these people. The one who comes to mind, of course, is Tom Starzl, the father of liver transplant, who died about 6 months after I spent a day with him.
Wow.
And we were sharing letters back and forth because, of course, he writes letters more than emails, but sort of a different era. But I'm just so glad I got to interact with him, and I so wish he had gotten to read the book, of course.
Of course.
That was amazing for me, to meet these heroes. And what I really wanted to know from them is not what they did, because I know what they did, but like how they were able to do it, how they were able to persist at this job when everyone thought they were going to fail and people thought they were murderers and never thought it was going to work. And these guys, persisted and made it work. So, but in terms of did I have the story? I think over the years I just collected patient stories without any clear story. But as I worked on an outline, I was able to fit, the patients into kind of the story I wanted to tell.
Sure.
Of course, there's so many more patient stories that I wish I could have included, which I hopefully will someday. But
do you have a daily writing process or a routine? Are you journaling? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I have to tell you, the experience was, I loved every second of it, and I learned so much from it. I got some great advice from my brother, who's been writing, for 30 years, and he gave me two pieces of advice when I was starting my actual book. And he said, number one, when you start writing the book, just write. He said, don't worry so much if it's good, if it's digressing, just go. Because he said the number one reason people don't finish their book is they get so focused on making it perfect that they, never get out of the gate. So
wait, let me ask you. No outline, or did you have did you have?
yes.
Yeah, tell me about that whole process.
I got ahead of that. Yeah, so I did start that way. So
Uh-huh.
I actually, once I had an agent, which it turns out if you want to write a book, if you can get a sibling who's a best-selling writer, that's a huge advantage. So
Of course.
I recommend starting with that.
Yeah.
But he helped me get an agent, which was great. And then we worked on a proposal, and I actually worked for a year on that proposal.
Really?
And
Interesting.
yeah, so my first version of it was this kind of like 16-page outline that was terrible. It actually was titled The Legend of Big Daddy, which that's sometimes my nickname in surgery, but I shouldn't admit that.
Well,
But
that's
anyways,
interesting. That's a whole other question. Put a pin in that for
that's a
later,
whole
right?
other story.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, so then he read that and he said, no, this is not what we're doing. So actually, we ended up writing about a 60-page proposal where each kind of couple weeks he would sort of assign me, like, all right, in this chapter, let's actually start with how it's going to start and then, then write about all the characters that are going to be in it. Or in the next chapter, he might say, just outline the story that's going to be in this chapter. And we went back and forth for about a year working on this proposal. And by the end, I had this really strong kind of proposal that was 60 pages long that had, was broken into the chapters, pretty much the chapters we ended up using.
Fabulous. That's great.
And that was actually how we sold the book, based on that proposal.
So did the writing then probably go much faster after you already had the framework set up?
It did, and during the writing of the proposal and the kind of wait to sell the book, I was also traveling around and seeing some of these pioneers who were still around.
Sure.
And then it actually is funny because once we sold the book, I had an editor who's wonderful, Gail Winston, who very kind of experienced editor, and I'm like, Gail, what should I do? And she's like, well, why don't you write the book? And I was like, okay. But, I didn't know how to do that. But I have to tell you, like, I sat down and I was so excited to write. Like, I couldn't wait to get out of bed at 4 a.m. And I would run down to our study and just write till the kids got up at 6. And then in between cases, I would write. In between surgeries, and then on the weekend all day, I would just write. I was obsessed. I loved it.
That's so wonderful.
I know. I couldn't wait to get back to it. It was just so exciting to me, and I was laughing and enjoying it. And I have to tell you, I digress. Ben told me just write. I digressed a lot, and so I wrote like crazy for a year straight. And at the end of the year, I actually reached out to my brother and I said, Ben, how long is a book? And he was like, well, we do it in words. It's like 60 to 120,000 words. And he asked me how long mine was. I had 300,000 words.
Oh, my goodness.
Written.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
But there were a ton of digressions that I knew I would be cutting.
Yeah. Well, it's just
fodder.
It's fodder for the next book. All the extra material.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But, so I did want to say, because I think this is great, the first piece of advice I mentioned about just writing.
Yeah.
But the second thing he told me that I think was awesome for me was he said, at the end of a day, never stop at the end of a chapter, because he said the hardest part is when you get up, you can't get going.
Okay.
He said always stop like in the middle of a story or even the middle of a sentence.
Oh, love it.
And then, like when you get up to start, you start finishing that thought or that story, and all of a sudden you're going. That really worked for me.
I had a great mentor who said, a page a day is a book a year. And you can easily write a page, maybe 300 words at the most.
Right.
And so when you think about it that way, you're like, yeah, I could do a page today. And then you do 3. And all of a sudden, in a few months, you have quite a big manuscript going. But so that's
Absolutely.
great. That's great. So, I want to ask you a few things about the book. I know you look at ethical issues of transplants. So could you talk a little bit about that, about what are some of those ethical issues that everyday folks like us might not consider?
Yeah, I think transplant has so many kind of great ethical scenarios for a few different reasons. One, it's kind of in all other areas of medicine, you're spending time trying to kind of push off death, get people not to die, or maybe help them have a good death. But in transplant, it kind of starts with death, and we take organs from people who've just died. And people probably don't realize this, but transplant, both the discipline and the most famous transplant surgeon, played a central role in defining brain death. And before the 1960s, brain death wasn't a thing. So most people thought that death meant your heart's not beating. That's what probably most people would think.
Sure.
The challenge of that for transplant is that the organs, become difficult to use as people lose their blood flow. It wasn't just for transplant, because there were lots of people in ICUs who kind of would be brain dead, but were still getting taken care of.
Sure.
And so it was in 1968 that Joe Murray, who was a transplant surgeon and then another ethicist, wrote kind of the premier, seminal article that defined brain death, which eventually became equivalent with legal death.
Okay.
So I think just knowing what is death and thinking about that is really fascinating and quite an ethical issue, as there have been a few people who've challenged that definition in a few kind of somewhat big cases.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. I think the other thing to mention is that we deal with allocation of limited resources, and we have to decide who should get them.
Right.
And so
it's a huge question. Absolutely.
Huge. And we do that every day. So, once a week we do kidney selection meeting, once a week we do liver selection meeting, where, you're deciding, is this person a candidate?
Sure.
I think the obvious one would be liver transplant for alcohol.
Right.
Which actually has become our most common cause of liver transplant.
Really? Interesting. So let's talk about that a little bit. I mean, there are a lot of judgments and opinions that could go into that. So if I'm understanding correctly, what you're saying is that somebody who is an alcoholic or has spent a life drinking and their liver has failed wants to receive a new liver to have a second chance at life. Am I right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there are a few different scenarios, but that's probably the most common.
And so how does that conversation go? How do we look at that as a society?
Right. I mean, in the early days of transplant, people were resistant to transplanting livers into people whose cause was alcoholism.
Sure.
I think now everyone would accept that alcoholism is a disease, and it's a disease that is difficult to treat. It can be treated successfully, but it takes a lot of effort, and it's really a lifelong treatment. You never really get cured from it, I don't believe, but you can get it sort of in remission, if you will.
Sure.
And so I think that the challenge is, if you have someone that's about to die and you have this treatment that can save them, if they have this other treatable disease, is that a reasonable use of that resource?
Sure.
And rather than, on the one hand, someone can judge the person and say, well, they screwed it up themselves. It's their own problem.
Right.
But I think the truth is most of the things we do in healthcare have something to do with some part behavioral, some part genetic, some part bad luck.
Sure.
And honestly, if no one smoked, drank, got into various accidents that one could avoid, there wouldn't be much for us to do. But I think we've gotten away from really judging a person with alcoholism as a bad person and more towards thinking about, do they have insight? Do they have the right support and the right commitment to, to do well with this transplant, to make it sort of worth it, if you will, to get a good outcome. And it's a lifelong treatment. If they slip up once, I don't see that as a failure. But if they, if they completely go back to drinking, that is a failure.
Sure.
So we really try to assess that, and we do pretty well. I mean, patients with alcoholic liver disease have as good outcomes as any other diagnosis.
Great. That's awesome.
But the more recent controversial topic has been people that come in with what we call acute alcoholic hepatitis, or people who are actively drinking. That's more challenging because sometimes they can be very young people in their 20s, and their liver is completely failed, and they have to sort of decide that one. So that's been a real challenge.
Yeah, I loved how on the HarperCollins review of your book, it talked about how you create life from loss, and that with every transplant surgery, you're making a miracle. Anyone who's doing this, which is it's awesome and really big. And I just wonder if if that ever sort of occurs to you, or you're just sort of going through your days doing your work as opposed to thinking of it in these large magnitudes. But it is creating life from loss and affecting miracles on Earth. Does that resonate with you?
It really does. And I mean, it is true that sometimes when you're busy and you're tired, you can kind of forget that. But truly, every time you see an organ, like a kidney start making urine on your hands, or a
Wow.
liver start pumping out bile, you remember, like, this is so amazing.
So
And when you
cool.
go on a donor, when you go on a procurement and you meet the donor family, and I've told this story before, but I was, at first you feel nervous going to meet this donor family, but they're so grateful to be able to talk to us, to be able to talk about the transplant, to tell us about this donor and how special, how this is the one positive thing in this otherwise, tragic time. And it's such a beautiful thought, and it means so much to make this gift happen. So I do see it all the time, and I from the first day I ever saw a kidney transplant till now, when I do other organs as well, I just remember, like, someone is giving this incredible gift. It's amazing to be a part of that.
I can only imagine. I mean, it's like poetry in motion. The human experience at its best and its worst.
It is.
And you're a part of that. You're alongside it, orchestrating it. Just really
Right.
in such a powerful position. I wanted to ask you, in your bio, it talks about that in addition to your clinical practice, you have an active laboratory that investigates the role of environmental exposures on the immune system. And I wanted to hear a little bit about that. What kind of work is that?
Yeah, I mean, so I've always had an active lab throughout my career as well, and it's sort of evolved in ways I might not have expected. But I study the immune system, and we use mice as our kind of primary model. But
Sure.
For various different reasons, since we focus on this particular receptor, it happens to respond to chemicals found in pollution. So we look at inhaled pollution and how this alters immune responses, and it alters them quite a bit.
Sure.
I don't only look at that. I actually also look at the role of diet and also the role of the bacteria in our gut, so like the microbiome and the role that has in the immune system. And that's actually a really hot topic right now
Oh,
in
yeah.
research. It kind of blows your mind that we never knew this for years, but the bacteria in our gut actually are essentially like an organ that play a huge role in how we respond to exposures and outside environments. So
Yeah.
we actually have one project where we're getting stool samples or poop samples from patients who reject kidneys versus those who accept them, and then transfer that stool into mice that have no bacteria, and then see how they do with organ transplants.
Wow.
So pretty cool, fascinating stuff.
Yeah. I've always been fascinated by the Eastern medicine approach to diet as, good health or ill health, that, what you eat determines a lot of your health.
Yeah.
And so it's really what you're saying is that that nutrition element, that food element is hugely powerful and impactful. So that's
I
really
think
great.
it's fair to say that in healthcare over the last few hundred years, we've sort of woefully neglected the role of nutrition. And I think we're getting better for sure, but there's still a lot we don't know.
Yeah, interesting.
So
on this podcast, we talk a lot about how people make meaning in their work or in their lives, how they find purpose. I wonder what advice you might have for our listeners about, how do you make each day meaningful? You're going to work, you're doing the things that you're obligated to do, but you're certainly finding purpose and inspiration, all the time. What would you advise our listeners about making meaning and finding purpose?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of ways I might address that. So, we all have our various coping mechanisms to deal with the different challenges in our lives. But, I've always tried to look for the humor in situations. Clearly, humor is my number one coping mechanism. But I enjoy people. I try to keep things light, keep people laughing, and be in general a positive person. I try not to waste too much emotional energy on things that aren't that important. So I try not to, there's various parts of my life in medicine, and I'm sure in everyone's life, of various paperwork or charting or this kind of thing, that I just try to be as efficient as possible and not get emotionally upset about those kinds of things, because they don't
Sure.
that doesn't really matter to me.
Uh-huh.
I try to, really focus on the things that I think matter. And for me, that's often the patient care,
Sure.
stuff that's going on in the lab. And I try to always be honest with who I really want to be and what matters to me. I think like a lot of people who go into my field, we train so hard and you kind of put your head down through your training that you come out and you never really thought about like, what do you actually want? And so trying to be honest about not what matters to other people, but what's going to be valuable to you. And of course that can change over time, but I think
Sure.
that's okay. You can, you can change your goals, but so always trying to question like, is this really important to me, or am I just doing this to, because it's what people think means I'm successful. So I've
Yeah.
tried to be
Yeah.
honest. I'm a guy who like, I have like, I get like obsessed about something and I go all in and try and master it, and then I get obsessed about another thing. So I don't
Sure.
balance like lots. I don't get obsessed with multiple things at one time. I think it's like sequential obsession. But
Sequential
like when you find
obsessions.
something that,
I
yeah,
like
and then
that.
I try to master it. I like taking on a new thing and trying to master it. And when you find something like that and you can dive into it, it's a great feeling to me.
Like writing 300,000
So
words in a year, right?
I loved
Yeah.
every word. Every word was great.
I'm sure. I'm looking forward to book number 2. I mean, it sounds like you have it done,
Absolutely.
That's great.
That's right.
Well, you know what?
That's
It's
it.
been so wonderful speaking with you. I really appreciate all that you do, and I'm really inspired by, how you're doing this incredibly hard work every day, this life-saving work, and affecting all of us for the better, but then sharing stories and really showing that human side of the miracles that happen every single day. So, Dr. Joshua Mezrich, thank you so much for being a part of the Make Meaning podcast.
Thank you. It was my pleasure. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you. And everybody look for that book, When Death Becomes Life,
Great.
Notes from a Transplant Surgeon. It's definitely worth the read. So thank you for being on the show.
Great, Lynn. Thanks so much.
Take care. Thanks for listening to the Make Meaning podcast. I'm Lynne Galadner, and I've really enjoyed being here with you today. You can find the Make Meaning podcast wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, and I'd love it if you'd share our great conversations with all your people so we can add meaning wherever we go and whatever we do.